How's it going, everyone? Don here. So today I'm going to sharpen my chainsaw, but I'm going to do it using this old school chainsaw torture device. Um, there's a little story behind this this machine or this thing, and that is that I acquired this back in the 1900s when I did small engine repair. I went to a tech school in high school. After school, I worked for a mom and pop small engine repair place, and didn't make very much money at it, but the intent was to learn. Well, when that guy retired, I ended up acquiring this very same tool. This is 40 years old, from going back to about 1983. I'm going to put this thing on my chain, on my bar, give my chainsaw a touch up, or give this chain some touch up. This one's not too bad. I've got another one that I'm going to sharpen in a different way that I'm going to show you. Because this device is practical yet impractical. One of the first things that I learned, at least the way I was taught, whether it's right or wrong, you be the judge, but I was always taught consistency is the most important thing. And so hand filing was, reserved for when you're in the forest. You're out in the woods and you nick something, or your chain gets dull, whatever reason, you got to touch it up. Use a hand file, you do it by hand. The problem with doing it by hand is that you can't consistently get the angle. Now you get it pretty close. I see everybody doing hand files now. Of course, there's devices that kind of help guide you in getting the right angle. But I was always taught that the angle, a consistent angle, was the important thing. In trying to get all the teeth exactly the same, which is why something like this was probably invented, right? This isn't practical, right? You can't take this into the forest with you and just strap it onto your bar and sharpen your chain. Although, in a perfect world, that'd be great. It would certainly do a nice job on your chain, but it's time consuming. This takes a long time, and it's just impractical to do touch-up work. The way this thing works is, first of all, you have to have the right size file for the right size chain. The files can be swapped out by just these thumb screws here, and you can take the file out. You set your, it's typically 30 degrees, you set your angle. There's this bar on here, which rides on this adjustment here, which keeps the file from going too deep. Thumb screw here, this is what locks it onto the bar. This just goes on the bar. I'll tighten this back thumb screw up to hold the, this clamps it to the bar, the thumb screw on the back side of this. And then this tightens these up, but they're spring loaded, so it'll just keep the chain from wobbling so much side to side, but it'll still slide through. There's an adjustment here. This is spring loaded, and this stops it from going too deep. Now the problem with this darn thing is it's not practical to carry into the forest with you, and filing by hand is the way to go when you're out in the woods. When you sharpen with a file, where do those metal filings go? Where do all the metal shavings go? Well, they go into your chain, they go into the joints, into the links, down into your bar, and they help promote premature wear. So this thing is a hassle to use, which is why it's been in the bottom of my toolbox for 40 years. I keep it more for sentimental, nostalgic type reasons. I've got another way that I usually do this, and it gives me the opportunity to take the chain off, take the cover off, clean it all, make sure my oil ports are clear, and it gives me a chance to also clean up all the shavings off the chain. So after we stopped using the chainsaw torture device, as I like to refer to it, went to this. I've had this since the early 80s as well. We used to charge $5 at the shop to sharpen the chain. We take the chain off, clean the bar, clean the cover, clean all the sawdust that gets in and around the clutch, clean up the oil holes and all of that, make sure it was all nice and clean, sharpen the chain, oil it all back up. This machine sped things up for sure, but as I was taught, it was more important that a sharpening be consistent. And that's what this does. It allows each tooth to be ground down exactly the same as the one before it. And so that was really the goal, which is really the goal of the other machine too. But the problem with the other machine is, the chain has to be on the saw to use it, and it's kind of a hassle to use. If you're going to leave the chain on the saw, I think nowadays just hitting it with a file real quick to freshen up the edge is probably the way to go. I know it's what most folks do now, and that works. But to put a factory fresh edge on a chain, I think using the machine here is the way to go. So this is the chain that I used to cut down the 3 trees with 1 stump. I'll put a link to that video right here. The thing with that video was I hit some nails, I hit the dirt, I was cutting the stumps off below grade, right? This chain really took a beating. I'm going to sharpen it using the machine here, then I'm going to put it on the saw, and we'll see how it cuts. The way this works is the chain rides in this track here. The chain rides in this track. This piece up here is where you butt the back of the tooth up against, lock it in place, and then you use the grinding wheel to grind down the tooth that you're going after. Now, there's a lot of adjustments on here. There's a depth setting to keep the wheel, or to keep the cutting wheel from going too deep and hitting the actual links. This adjustment here is for setting this forward or back. So that's how this works. You would bring this into the link you're working on, butt it up against this metal stopper, and then lock it in place. And then this would come down, cut that tooth, and then I'd move it to the next one, lock it down, cut that tooth. By doing that, it allows for each tooth to be cut consistently, and then when I need to cut the other side, or the links facing the other direction, loosen this, turn it, and reposition the chain to the links that I need to get to. So this thing is kind of loud, but it is what it is. Nothing I can do about that. So I've got it pretty much adjusted to where I want it. Let's put an edge on this chain and throw it back on the saw, see what we get out of it. I'm going to take this chain off and swap it for the one that I just sharpened. So in the old days, we clean all this up, put the bar back on, take the chain, put it back on with the cutters facing the right direction. Probably about right. And this is just regular motor oil, and this will fling off as soon as the chain starts to spin, because motor oil isn't sticky like bar and chain oil, but it will prevent this thing from being run dry. And you know, right or wrong, maybe it's an overkill, but it was what they always taught me to do. It puts a good amount of oil on the bar. It also would prevent this thing from getting nasty if the saw sat before the customer went to use it. Now, a lot of this stuff that I used to do was more geared towards the homeowner, right? Because most pros are going to do a lot of their own, you know, maintenance in this stuff like this is you know, maintenance that a pro is going to do on his own. He's not going to pay some mom and pop place to do this type of service to his saw. So this was really geared towards, you know, the homeowner, the occasional firewood cutter, but no one who does it professionally, because those guys were more likely to do their own maintenance. But this prettied up everything. It oiled everything. The saw was good to go. If the customer was going to leave it sit for a while, it would be fine to leave it sit like this. Everything's got some oil on it. The other thing you could do is they make this gauge for the rakers. This goes on top, and where is it? It goes on like that, and then you can file the rakers down. This chain is actually new. Well, dare I say new? It's not new anymore, so I'm not going to go through all that. But that was the first sharpening that chain had ever seen, because it was a new chain before I destroyed it. So that says pine. It's pretty soft, but it is throwing some chips out, so I'm happy with that cut. It's cutting well. I don't know that I'd say it's cutting like a brand new one.
try that chain on something a little bit harder, and that is this tree here, which I think is elm. So this last log was just too heavy for me to be able to muscle it out of there on my own, and I didn't want to cut it on the ground and booger up my freshly sharpened blade, right? So I did cut it down up the trunk a little bit, but it's laying on a branch that's maybe 2 or 3 inches thick, so there was no chance I was going to hit the ground. So I just cut it off there, which left it a little bit long for me to move it by hand. But again, the backhoe and the thumb to the rescue. I was able to pull that log out of there with the backhoe without too much fuss. Of course, I could have grabbed it with a chain and skidded it out, but my chain's in the shed. This was just way easier. And that log wasn't overly huge, so no big deal. But yeah, I cut through this this hardwood. Again, I think it's elm, but I cut through it nice and easy. So I'll take that. A chain that would have otherwise been ruined. You did have some pretty good nicks in it in looking close at it, but being able to sharpen it on the machine, fantastic. I mean, I do have spare chains. I could just swap it out for a new chain. They're only about 20 bucks for that saw. So yeah, good stuff. I appreciate you hanging in there with me. I'll see you in the next one.